The confrontation in my living room overlooking Lake Travis was the moment everything cracked open. My older sister stood there in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes flat, with the same cold entitlement she had worn since we were kids. She did not ask how my day had gone, or why I had missed the last 2 family dinners. She went straight for the throat, laying out the concealed account draining, like it was just another Tuesday favor I owed them. Hi, my name is Sophia Grace Bennett. I am 31 years old. That confrontation in my living room overlooking Lake Travis was the moment everything cracked open. My older sister stood there in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes flat, with the same cold entitlement she had worn since we were kids. She did not ask how my day had gone or why I had missed the last 2 family dinners. She went straight for the throat, laying out the concealed account draining, like it was just another Tuesday favor I owed them. I had spent the morning at my forensic accounting firm downtown, knee-deep in a high-profile audit that could make or break my promotion. A major client had flagged irregularities in their books, and the pressure was already mounting when my phone buzzed with a call from the office manager. I stepped out to take it, expecting a routine update. Instead, Claire Ramirez, my closest colleague and mentor, told me in a hushed voice that an anonymous tip had just come in through the firm's secure line. Someone had leaked that my family's finances were tangled in suspicious transfers. The tip named my mother and my older sister specifically. Claire warned me. The partners were already asking questions, and if it spread, my own reputation as the go-to fraud investigator would be the first casualty. I hung up feeling the first chill of real dread, but I pushed it down. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Then my older sister showed up unannounced at my villa door an hour later, and the coincidence turned into something far uglier. She did not waste time on pleasantries. She repeated the demand she had made over the phone the night before. I needed to use my professional access to smooth out the paper trail on the accounts they had been quietly draining from my grandmother's retirement portfolio for nearly a year. No big drama, she said with that sarcastic little smile. Just family helping family. I stood there in the entryway, the Austin sun slanting through the tall windows behind her, and felt my stomach tighten. My grandmother, Eleanor, had trusted them with power of attorney after her last health scare, and now they had been siphoning funds to cover my brother-in-law Ryan's failing business ventures and my older sister's lifestyle. They called it a temporary bridge. I called it concealed theft. The anonymous tip Claire mentioned suddenly felt less random. Someone, maybe our neighbor, Marcus Klein, who lived 2 villas down and had seen my mother's car there too often, had noticed the pattern and dropped the hint that blew the lid off. My older sister saw the hesitation in my eyes and leaned in closer, her voice dropping to that vicious, personal tone she reserved for me. Do not act shocked. You are the one who is always preaching about following the money at work. Now the money has followed us right to your front door. Fix it, or the partners at your firm will hear how their star analyst cannot even keep her own family clean. The jab landed exactly where she intended. My work was the one thing I had built without their help, and she knew it. One leaked rumor in this tight-knit hillside community could spread like wildfire through the club, the neighborhood association, even the firm's social circles. I did not raise my voice. I never do. I simply asked her how long they had been doing it and how deep the hole actually was. She shrugged like it was nothing, then dropped the first mini bomb of the afternoon. They had already moved nearly $200,000 through a series of small transfers, using a misplaced contract copy my mother had found in my old files from when I helped my grandmother with estate planning years ago. That document gave them just enough legal cover to start the drains without immediate flags. My older sister's eyes glittered with satisfaction as she watched the realization hit me. They had been using my own professional advice against me. Before I could respond, my phone lit up again. This time it was my mother on the line. She did not bother with hello either. She launched straight into the same script, reminding me that my grandmother's accounts were family resources, and that refusing to help now would force them to take more drastic measures. The call ended with her casual threat that if I did not cooperate by the end of the week, the reputation damage would reach my boss. Before I could even file my next report, I hung up and looked back at my older sister, who was already scrolling through her phone, probably texting my brother-in-law Ryan the play-by-play. That was the first real cliffhanger of the day. I have 48 hours before the firm's internal review meeting, and the anonymous tip was already sitting in Claire's inbox like a live wire. I told my older sister I needed time to think. She laughed that sharp, detached laugh and walked out, leaving the door open behind her as if she owned the place. I closed it slowly, the click echoing in the empty villa, and felt the cold detachment settle over me like armor. I was not going to panic. I was going to document everything. The next morning, I drove downtown and pulled Claire aside in the break room. I laid out the bare facts without emotion, showing her the screenshots I had taken of the suspicious transfers my older sister had accidentally left open on her phone during the confrontation. Claire's eyes widened, but she did not lecture. She simply asked if I wanted her to run a quiet trace through our secure databases. I nodded. That decision bought me a little breathing room, but it also created the second mini cliffhanger. The trace would take 24 hours. And in that window, my mother and my older sister could move more money or spin their own story to the neighbors. By evening, the hillside villas felt smaller, the winding roads tighter. Marcus Klein waved from his driveway as I pulled in his usual friendly nod, now carrying a hint of concern. He had been the one who noticed my mother's late-night visits to my grandmother's villa a few blocks over. He did not say anything then, but I wondered if he had been the anonymous tipper. I did not ask. I just gave him a small wave and went inside, the weight of the pact hanging heavier than before. 2 days later, Claire called me into her office. The trace had confirmed everything. The accounts were being drained in deliberate small increments to avoid red flags, and the paper trail looped back through a joint access form my mother had forged, using the misplaced contract copy. My older sister had signed off on every transfer. Claire slid a printed summary across the desk and told me the firm was now obligated to report anything that looked like elder financial exploitation. My stomach did not drop. I just felt the cold clarity sharpen. This was no longer a family problem. It was evidence. I left the office that afternoon with a folder of my own notes and drove straight to my grandmother's villa. She was sitting on the back patio, looking smaller than I remembered, the Lake Travis breeze moving the leaves around her. I sat down and told her the truth in the plainest words I could find. She listened without interrupting, then asked me one quiet question. Did they think I would not notice I did not have an answer that would comfort either of us? Instead, I promised I would handle it my way quietly, thoroughly, and without the screaming matches they expected. That night, my older sister texted me a single line tick-tock. Loyalty test ends Friday. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then set the phone face down. The reputation damage was already starting to spread. A mutual acquaintance at the club had mentioned hearing something about the Bennetts over lunch. I knew it would only get worse. But I also knew I had the recording I had secretly made during that first confrontation, the one where my older sister casually admitted the pact and the draining. That recording was my core secret, the one piece they did not know I had. I played it once in the quiet of my villa, her voice crisp and unapologetic on the speaker. It was not rage I felt. It was the detached certainty that this chapter was ending one way or another. The question was what price I would have to pay to make sure the truth finally won. If you have ever been hit with a family loyalty test that felt more like a trap than a request drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done in that moment. I am still figuring out how deep the damage goes, and reading your stories helps more than you know. The recording played on loop in my mind as I sat in the quiet of my villa that night, the Lake Travis lights flickering distantly through the tall windows. I did not replay it for comfort or rage. I simply let my older sister's words sit there cold and unfiltered proof of the pact they had made without me. By morning, the reputation damage had already begun to spread faster than I expected. A text from Claire Ramirez at the firm arrived before I even reached my desk downtown. The partners had received a follow-up to the anonymous tip, this one attaching screenshots of suspicious transfers linked to my family's names. Claire's message was brief and professional, but the subtext was clear. My standing as the firm's top forensic analyst was now under quiet review. I kept my face neutral in the morning meeting, answering questions about the high-profile audit with the same detached precision I always used. Inside, the pieces were clicking into place. My older sister had mentioned a misplaced contract copy during our confrontation, the one I had drafted years ago when my grandmother Eleanor updated her estate papers and gave my mother limited power of attorney for emergencies only. They had twisted that document into blanket access, using it to authorize the concealed account draining in small, calculated increments that flew under most radar systems. Nearly $200,000 siphoned so far, funneled through my brother-in-law Ryan's failing ventures and my older sister's endless lifestyle upgrades here in the hillside villas. The anonymous tip had exposed the theft at exactly the right moment, forcing their hand before they could cover their tracks completely. That afternoon, my phone vibrated with a call from my mother. She did not bother with small talk either. Her voice carried the same flat entitlement my older sister had used the day before. Sophia, this nonsense with the firm needs to stop. Your grandmother's accounts are family business, not some federal case file for you to wave around. I listened without interrupting, noting how she framed the draining as a shared responsibility rather than the theft it was. She reminded me that my reputation in these villas and at work was only as strong as the family's silence. One more leak, she said, and the club members who mattered, the ones who referred high-net-worth clients to my firm, would start asking questions about my family loyalty issues. I ended the call with a single calm reply. I would handle it my way. No promises, no panic. The cold detachment that had settled over me since the first confrontation felt like the only reliable thing left. Later that evening, my older sister showed up again, this time at the clubhouse near the villas where I had gone for a quiet walk after work. She cornered me near the overlook, her designer bag slung over one shoulder, the same sarcastic edge, sharpening every word. Still playing the martyr, at the office, Claire Ramirez called me earlier. Yes, I have her number too. She is worried about your stress levels. Fix the paper trail or watch your promotion vanish by next quarter. The jab landed, but I did not flinch. I simply asked her if she understood that the anonymous tip had already triggered an internal compliance review. Her laugh was short and cutting. Then, untrigger it. That is what family does. The second mini cliffhanger of the week hit when Marcus Klein approached me the next morning as I was leaving for the firm. He lived 2 villas down the same neighbor who had quietly noted my mother's frequent visits to my grandmother Eleanor's place. He kept his voice low, glancing around the winding hillside road before speaking. Sophia, I sent that tip. Not to hurt you, to protect your grandmother. I saw the transfers on her statements when she asked me to help with her mail last month. The contract copy they used looked off like it had been altered after the fact. His words confirmed what I already suspected. The misplaced document had been the key, but now it was evidence in someone else's hands too. I thanked him without emotion, the detached calm holding steady. This was not personal revenge. It was simply the truth unfolding exactly as it had to. I drove straight to my grandmother Eleanor's villa after that conversation. She was in the sunroom overlooking the water, looking frailer than the last time I had visited. I showed her the printed summary Claire had given me, the one, detailing the concealed drains month by month. No tears, no raised voices from either of us. She simply nodded and asked if the recording I had made would hold up. I told her it would. The core secret, the one where my older sister openly admitted the pact and laughed about using the contract copy, sat safely backed up on my encrypted drive. My grandmother Eleanor squeezed my hand, once her grip surprisingly firm. Then do what you need to do. I earned that money myself. The pressure escalated again by Thursday. My older sister texted a group message that included my mother and my brother-in-law Ryan, a screenshot of an email from the neighborhood association president asking about recent financial inquiries involving the Bennett family. Reputation damage was moving from whispers at the club to official channels. My mother followed up with a call demanding I use my forensic skills to bury the trace before the firm's review meeting on Friday. This is your loyalty test, Sophia. Pass it or lose everything you have built here in the villas. Her voice stayed cold, laced with that long-held resentment I had stopped trying to understand years ago. I listened, documented the call time and wording in my notes, and hung up without agreeing to anything. Claire pulled me aside again at the firm that same afternoon. The compliance team had escalated the anonymous tip to a formal inquiry. She slid another folder across her desk, this one containing the full chain of transfers tied back to the altered contract copy. The partners like you, Sophia, but they cannot ignore this. If your family's draining is proven elder financial exploitation, it could taint your clearances. The words hung between us like a timed fuse. I nodded once the detached patience I had cultivated over years of audits, keeping my expression neutral. I told her I had everything I needed to resolve it cleanly. She did not press. She knew my work ethic well enough to trust the quiet resolve behind my words. That night, the final piece of the current puzzle arrived in my inbox. A scanned copy of the original misplaced contract from my grandmother Eleanor's files, the one my mother had found and altered. Marcus had forwarded it after speaking with her directly. The discrepancies were glaring extra clauses added in different ink signatures that did not quite match the notary stamp. I saved it alongside the recording, the cold certainty sharpening further. They had built their entire scheme on that single document, thinking I would never connect the dots or choose to expose it. Friday morning brought the next escalation, exactly as I expected. My older sister called while I was driving to the firm's review meeting. Her voice carried a new edge of urgency beneath the sarcasm. The club president just asked me point blank about the drains. Fix this today, or I swear the whole hillside will know how you turned on your own blood over a few spreadsheets. I let her finish, then reminded her in the same flat tone that the anonymous tip had already started the clock. She hung up mid-sentence, the silence on the line more telling than any threat. The reputation damage was now fully public in our small circle of villas, and the financial penalties were beginning to bite. My grandmother, Eleanor's bank, had flagged the accounts for review freezing further transfers pending verification. I walked into the review meeting with the folders in my briefcase and the recording queued on my phone. The partners listened as I laid out the facts without drama or accusation. The concealed draining, the pact my older sister had admitted on tape. The altered contract copy, they all fit together like the fraud cases I audited every day. Claire sat beside me, nodding at key points. The room stayed quiet when I finished. No one shouted. No one needed to. The evidence spoke for itself, and the anonymous tip had simply accelerated what was already inevitable. But as I left the meeting, my phone lit up with another text from my mother. It contained a single line that stopped me cold in the parking lot. We have one more copy of the contract, and this one names you as co-signer on the latest transfer. Think very carefully before you burn everything down. The words sat there on the screen, the final twist in their scheme I had not seen coming. They had used the misplaced document one last time, forging my involvement to tie me directly to the drains, if the truth ever surfaced. The loyalty test had just become a legal trap, and the next 24 hours would decide whether I walked away clean or carried the weight of their choices forever. The text from my mother sat on my screen like a final calculated jab. I read it twice, in the firm parking lot, the Austin afternoon heat pressing against the car windows. But the words did not shake the cold detachment that had taken root days ago. One more copy of the contract. My name added as co-signer on the latest transfer. They had used the misplaced document one last time, forging just enough to drag me into their concealed, account draining if everything collapsed. The reputation damage that had been spreading through the hillside villas was about to become something far more permanent professional ruin if I pushed back. I did not reply. Instead, I drove straight to my grandmother Eleanor's villa, the winding roads feeling narrower than usual. She met me on the sunroom overlooking Lake Travis, the same quiet space where I had shown her the first trace report. This time I laid out the newest text and the scanned copy Marcus Klein had forwarded. My grandmother's hand stayed steady as she examined the altered clauses, the forged signature that now carried my name. "They never asked me about any of this," she said simply. No anger in her voice, just the same weary clarity I felt. I told her the recording of my older sister admitting the pact was ready, and that the anonymous tip had already forced the firm's hand. She nodded once and asked me what I planned to do. I answered without hesitation. Expose the truth, let the financial penalties fall where they belonged, and accept whatever came next for me. That evening, my older sister demanded a meeting at the clubhouse overlook, the same spot where she had cornered me earlier in the week. My mother arrived first, my brother-in-law Ryan trailing behind her with his usual nervous energy. The four of us stood apart from the evening crowd, the water lights reflecting off the glass railings. My older sister started with the same vicious sarcasm that had defined every conversation since the anonymous tip broke. "You really think that little recording changes anything, Sophia? We have the contract with your name on it. One call to your partners and your entire career in these villas is finished." My mother cut in her tone flat and entitled. "This is still family business. Sign off on the cover story or the reputation damage will follow you to every client meeting from here to downtown." I listened to them lay out the final threat, the one where they would claim I had authorized the transfers using my forensic expertise, turning their concealed draining into my problem. My brother-in-law Ryan shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The psychological jabs kept coming, each one sharper than the last, designed to make me flinch. My older sister leaned in, voice low. "You have always been the careful one hiding behind your audits while we actually lived. Now live with this." The words should have stung. They did not. The cold detachment held firm, turning every insult into data I could use. I reached into my bag and set my phone on the table between us, speaker already playing. The recording started mid-sentence. My older sister's voice crystal clear as she bragged about the pact, the months of small transfers, the way they had twisted the misplaced contract copy into a weapon. "We have been draining those accounts for months. Your name is all over the paperwork now." The audio continued, capturing her laugh when she mentioned how easy it had been to use my grandmother Eleanor's power of attorney. My mother's face went rigid. My brother-in-law Ryan stepped back as if the sound itself could burn him. My older sister tried to snatch the phone, but I simply held it steady until the file ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Then my mother recovered first, her voice slicing through the quiet with fresh venom. "That proves nothing except you were spying on family. The contract still has your signature." I did not argue. I pulled the final document from my folder, the original misplaced contract copy Marcus had secured from my grandmother Eleanor's files, complete with forensic markers, showing the alterations in different ink. I laid it beside the forged version they had created. The discrepancies were undeniable. "This last document flips the entire story," I said tone level. "It shows the forgery. The bank will see it. The firm will see it. And the financial penalties will be imposed on every account you touched." My older sister's eyes narrowed, but for the first time, the sarcasm cracked. "You would really burn your own reputation to do this." I met her gaze without blinking. "The truth is not a burn. It is just the truth." My brother-in-law Ryan muttered something about lawyers and walked away first. My mother lingered a moment longer, delivering one last cold promise that the neighborhood association and the club would hear exactly how I had chosen spreadsheets over blood. Then they left. I stayed at the rail, watching the water, the detached calm, settling deeper than ever. No victory cheers, no dramatic breakdown, just the quiet knowledge that the pact had finally been exposed. The next 48 hours moved like a slow, inevitable audit. The firm's compliance team reviewed everything I submitted. Claire Ramirez stood by my side during the final meeting, but the partners made their decision clear while the evidence cleared me of any intentional wrongdoing. The mere association with the family scheme had already damaged client trust. 2 major accounts pulled their business within the week, citing reputational risk in the community. The reputation damage I had feared became permanent in the hillside villas. Whispers at the club, sidelong glances from neighbors, a quiet distancing from the social circles I had once moved through effortlessly. My promotion was postponed indefinitely. The financial penalties hit my mother and my older sister hardest. The bank froze. The remaining accounts demanded repayment of the drained funds plus fees and flagged the case for further review. My grandmother Eleanor's portfolio was secured in a new, ironclad arrangement I helped draft. My brother-in-law Ryan's ventures collapsed under the scrutiny, leaving my older sister to face the lifestyle adjustments she had never planned for. I made the painful choice in the end. I could have fought the firm's caution, hired lawyers, tried to salvage every shred of my standing here. Instead, I accepted the sidelining. Truth over toxic ties meant walking away from the illusion that my work and my family could ever coexist without cost. I submitted my resignation 2 weeks later, effective immediately. The detachment I carried was not bitterness, it was clarity. I had chosen the truth, and the truth had exacted its price. Today I sit in a smaller villa on the quieter side of Lake Travis, the one I found after the dust settled. My grandmother Eleanor visits often, her account safe, her peace restored. Marcus Klein still waves from his driveway, the anonymous tip long since acknowledged between us as the quiet favor it was. Claire Ramirez checks in from the firm offering freelance consulting work that keeps me steady without the politics. My older sister and my mother have not contacted me since that night at the Overlook. The last I heard, the financial penalties continue to mount, and the reputation damage they tried to weaponize against me has circled back to them in the tight-knit community they once ruled. I do not regret the choice. The lingering, empowered calm I feel each morning is the only closure I need, strong, silent, and entirely mine. Family earns trust. It is never owed. I finally understood that the only loyalty test that mattered was the one I set for myself. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose truth over toxic ties, even when it cost you your reputation and your place in the world you built, tell me in the comments what that moment felt like for you. I read every single one.